What's up, everybody? Jake Blickenstaff coming back at you another episode of the Northeast Georgia Real Estate Podcast. So I'm excited to bring you guys another fantastic guest today, Brennan McGoldrick.
Got it.
Absolutely. So he is a business broker here in the Athens area with a pretty spectacular past as far as like previous career and how he got into it. So I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'm going to let you kind of take it away, but tell everybody who you are and kind of what you do and how you got into it.
Yeah, so it's a long, winding road, I guess. But I started my professional career as a veterinarian. I practiced in private practice for about 11 years. Somewhere in that point, I went back to business school to earn a business degree. I sold my practice and realized that I really enjoyed that transition process. You know, selling a practice to another group, what that meant for me. You know, what that meant for the people around me. So I started working specifically in the veterinary practice arena, helping people like myself exit their business and liquefy their assets. And so I've been doing that for about half a decade now, and have recently moved out of that space into a more generalist space, right, where it's not just focused on one industry. Realizing that at the end of the day, many businesses are run the same way. Now trying to work with other business owners, helping do the same thing.
Well, that's awesome. I know that from like a commercial real estate standpoint, it's I wouldn't necessarily say it's easy, but for me, it's easy to be able to evaluate a building based off comps. But I can understand from your side of the world where it could be a little bit more difficult because you might not have two similar businesses directly next to each other. So like you coming into the picture, what does that normally look like and when does that happen? As opposed to like for me, like there has to be a real estate asset attached to it.
Yeah, so I think we try to get into the picture maybe a little bit sooner than a commercial real estate broker like yourself, right? Typically people call about real estate, in my opinion, when they're ready to transact, right?
Yeah.
And generally though, thinking about selling a business is a bit longer of a runway, right? So I would advise people to start thinking months, if not years in advance of, what are my options with my business? Because it's not always just a cash sale, right? There are different options that people have, whether it's sell the business, give the business to someone else, meaning a family member, sell a part of the business, not all of the business. There are a lot of options that people need to think about. The most common question that I get is, what is my business worth?
Yeah.
And I think that's where comps can be helpful. There are some databases that I access that show similar businesses, but anyone who tells you that they can tell you exactly what a business is worth is probably not being truthful, right? The best thing we can do is generally, give an idea of what similar businesses have sold for historically, compare that to current market trends, and give a best estimate of what a business is worth. But I always tell people the same thing. A business is worth what someone is willing to pay for it.
Absolutely.
Just like any real estate asset, right? It's worth what someone will pay, but we want to have an idea going into a transaction of generally what is this worth. Other similar style businesses have sold for X. We think your business is worth Y for these reasons. Maybe it's a higher revenue, maybe it's growing faster, et cetera. So there are those comps available, probably not as directly as in the real estate market, but they are available and do exist.
Well, that's cool. I know that you're an extremely valuable resource for me and everybody on my side of the table, just because I come across a lot of situations, and we were previously speaking off camera about a client that, they have an existing business and, they want to exit in a couple of years. And so I'm bringing you into the picture well in advance, just like you said, because just like in commercial real estate or really any investment real estate is the holding period is when you determine on when you're actually going to disposition that asset or that business. Like you'd have to be able to like look at it and be like, hey, I'm going to do it for this many years. And then you can basically get an idea of what kind of that sale is going to look like.
That's right. I think it's worth talking in advance. It doesn't cost a client anything to talk to me, like it generally probably doesn't cost to talk to you. Right? What is my asset worth? What should I do with it? I think the worst scenarios I've ever seen with a transition of ownership of a business are when an owner was forced to do it suddenly. When you think about a fire sale, or maybe there's some emergency or that person's health issue or something like that, where they don't have any options because they have to dispose of those assets immediately. maybe they can't get the highest price because they don't have the options. So I think to start thinking in advance, it doesn't cost anyone anything except a little bit of time to start planning, looking at financial data. Maybe there are issues with the business that can be fixed and corrected to make it more marketable down the road. Maybe it's worth a lot more now than it would be worth 2 years from now. So I think it's always worth exploring in advance. It certainly never hurts to do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. So before we dive into like some more like tips and strategies from like a business brokerage standpoint, let's learn a little bit more about you. Like how long you been in the Athens area, you know, and what does that look like? What's your involvement with the community and things like that?
Yeah, so I've been in the Athens area total about 15 years now. Some of that's on and off. I went to school here, went to grad school here, was here for a short time, moved away, came back. I think Athens has always, like for most people who go to school here, has that pull, right, to bring people back. And, a big part of this business scout that I'm doing now is really designed to be more involved in this community. I worked, as I mentioned, in one industry across the country. And, one of the downsides to doing that, you travel to some great places and you meet some great people, but you don't get to know your community.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's why I decided, hey, I'd love to work with the people in this community, get to know my neighbors, participate in the business activities of this community, give back to the community. So that's really what Scout is about, and why I started it was to be more involved here, not just a resident of Athens, but a part of this community.
Well, very cool. I know that I've been here since 2018, and just in that short amount of time period, you start to form some great networking, some great connections, some great relationships with some people that they might not have a need right now, but something might happen in 3 years, and all of a sudden, hey, Brennan, what's going on, man? I need to start talking to you about, potentially exiting my business and all that kind of stuff. So it's good to be able to have kind of those roots and be able to form those relationships for whenever that need does come up.
It really is, and I think there's a difference between having a house in Athens and living in Athens. And up until now, I've had a house in Athens and I've lived at the airport, right? So now I live in Athens and really want to work with people who are in this community.
Very cool. So tell me about some of the successes that you've had kind of since you transitioned over to the business broker side, whether it was like when you were just doing the vet stuff or now that you're more of a generalist, kind of open to all businesses.
Yeah, so, we can certainly talk about business successes. I mean, there have been complicated transactions and large transactions and transactions where I felt like I made a difference that maybe someone else couldn't have made because it required a little bit of extra touch. I think in the business brokerage world, you can get lost in numbers and financials and statistics, but I really think the biggest successes, are from a personal standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So when I sell a business for someone who just wants out, right? He owns a business, doesn't enjoy what he does, he wants a lifestyle change. Maybe he wants to move. I had a client move from one state to another not long ago, and he called me. He actually moved from Arizona to the Ozarks. He called me the day after closing, and he said, "You know what I did today? I went outside and I stood in the rain. I've never stood in the rain before in Phoenix." And, he said, "You changed my life when you sold my business." And I think that sounds a little bit cliche, but for a lot of people, selling a business is a very emotional thing. Mm-hmm. It's not just a business transaction. Especially if you started a company, you grew it by yourself, you put in those blood, sweat, and tears for 60, 80 hours a week. Even if you're getting a big paycheck, when you hand the keys to someone else, that's a big deal. And I think that's where, I really enjoy this profession, because you get to know people, you get to become their friends, you get to become their trusted confidants. Mm-hmm. And when you see a successful transition and see their happiness after, those are probably the biggest success stories that I see.
Yeah, that's huge, because just like with on the residential real estate side, it is more of an emotional transaction instead of just like commercial.
Right.
And then on the business, like you said, when they're starting it from scratch and they have put all that work in, it's almost like they're getting rid of one of their kids, because they've built it from ground up.
One of the things people often talk about when we sell the business is how they started on their own. They remember those long weekends and long nights, and so you really understand that this is a baby to them, right? And this is a big deal to hand it off. And it's not ever about just the number. It's about what's my legacy, what's going to happen to this business after I sell it. And it's it's a really important thing that I think when we look at financial statements and tax returns and all those sorts of things, we forget about the emotional component to it. So when we succeed, we make somebody really happy. That's an important part of it.
Yeah, I agree. So one of the things outside of like individuals that actually do own their business that are potentially looking to sell in the future, on the flip side of that are individuals that want to buy into a business. You guys are great contacts for that exactly because you already have kind of a database of people that you have already been talking to over the last couple of years. Individuals that, hey, I'm thinking about selling, but I'm a couple of years out. So what advice would you potentially give for anybody that is looking to buy a pre-existing business and take that over and that's what they want to dive into?
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there looking for anything to buy, right? They want to invest in a successful business. Maybe they feel like they can perform better in that business than they can in the stock market or something like that. So there are a lot of people looking to buy. People don't even necessarily need to be experts in a particular field. If I wanted to buy an aquarium store, for example, I don't have to know anything about that. I have to be ready to learn. I have to be ready to consult with experts and put in the time to do it. I think the most important thing I would recommend to people is to be ready to be financially qualified. If you're going to purchase a business, whether the owner is going to finance it for you, you're going to go to a bank, there's going to be some capital required. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't have to be a lot. Could come from family, could come from friends, but there has to be some financial capability to obtain a business, especially if you're going through an SBA lender or something like that that has liquidity requirements, down payment requirements. Start thinking about where that capital is going to come from. And there are some really successful business owners who started with $1,000 in their pocket. That can happen too, but a source of capital, whether it's a friends and family loan or something, is really important when you go to look to buy a business.
Is there any pointers or recommendations that you can provide as far as like, let's just say a rough valuation of like a 2x or a 3x of like top line revenue or profit, or what are some of the basic fundamentals that you look at or that you would give somebody if they were starting to kind of go down that road? Obviously, I'm going to push them in your direction to come have a conversation with you.
Right.
But if you're just talking to somebody like, hey, if you're looking at buying a business, this is potentially what you want to kind of look at for a baseline.
There are a lot of different models for business valuation. I don't think any of them are exact science. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where it goes back to what we talked about before with comps. Every industry is different. People generally think, okay, a small business sells for maybe 3 to 4 times what it makes in a year. But not every small business sells for that. Some sell for 10 times and 15 times and 20 times. Some sell for 1 or 2. So it really goes back to, what are the comparables? How important is this industry right now? For example, if you are in IT, that's always important. If you are in artificial intelligence right now,
extremely important right now.
Business is extremely important right now, right? So that's going to be a little bit different. And are you in a service industry that's in high demand? The veterinary industry that I was in before, is it a recurring revenue model? All those types of things matter. But there's not an exact science to valuation, like I mentioned, and there's not a recipe for every business. Mm-hmm. I think industry specific is the best way to describe that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. Now, on the seller side, is there anything like you're talking about? Some sellers, they get into trouble, like if they're having to do a fire sale, or they don't look at, having that runway in advance of saying, hey, you need to get a couple things in line first before we attempt to sell this business based off, marketable value. Do you have any tips that you would recommend saying, hey, if you're considering selling in the future, and granted, if you haven't spoke to Brennan, you need to, but like saying, hey, make sure you have at least like 2 or 3 years worth of revenue and profit. Make sure your books are up to date. Make sure, whatever else fill in the box on that list.
I think especially if a buyer is going to need a lender, there are specific requirements that lender is going to provide. Mm-hmm. Or require 3 years of financial statements is typical. Some private equity buyers may require 5 years of financial statements. So having financial statements available is one thing. I think an equally big part is having clean financial statements. And clean doesn't mean that you can't include your personal cell phone or your personal vehicle. We can always adjust for that. But well done, consistent financial statements, I think not only are a requirement for most buyers so they can truly understand the profitability of a business, But I think they also give the impression to buyers that this is a really well-run company when the financial statements look really clean. So if I had to give one piece of advice to any business owner, it's to make sure that the books are in order. It's easy, for my business, I do them myself. A professional can do them better than I can. And so I think anytime someone is thinking a sale is on the horizon, even if it's years out, professional bookkeeping is really important, I think.
I completely agree with that. It makes the whole package a lot more appealing.
That's right.
As soon as you start seeing messy, whether it's financials or like, hey, we don't have that, it's like, I'm not interested in this anymore.
That's right. And what I tell people when we go to market, we want it to look as nice as possible, right? And a part of that is the financial statements.
Yeah.
Are they nice and clean? Can we provide all of the information that a buyer's going to want? If I'm leasing a property, I need a copy of the lease. We need that information. And it looks unprofessional when a buyer says, hey, I need a copy of the lease. Well, we can't find it. Or, what about this equipment? When was it purchased? We don't know the answer. We want to make sure that we're educated, and as brokers, we're educated. We can answer questions quickly. We know where to go for information. We can provide W-2s, and we can provide tax returns and 1099s. I think it's just all part of putting a nice bow on it before you try to hand it to someone else.
So over the years, I'm sure you've seen your share of sticky situations or troubling transactions. What was one of the biggest challenges that you've come across so far?
One seller threatened to feed me to an alligator because I didn't have a business card in my pocket to hand him, so he thought I was breaking in. I think one of the things, I was talking to someone about this yesterday, partnerships, multiple owner situations are always tough because not everyone is always aligned on the goals. Yeah. Is it just about purchase price? Is it just about a quick exit? Does one owner want to stay in and one wants to get out? Those are really tricky situations. And the more owners you have, I think the harder it is to transact because you have to get everybody on the same page. I had a business with 35 owners one time.
Oh my goodness.
Everyone had to unanimously agree on everything, including non-compete covenants and indemnification clauses, and everyone had to put their signature on the purchase agreement. That's a hard thing to do. It was hard to find all of that.
I couldn't imagine that on a real estate transaction, much less for a business.
If you're just a sole proprietor, I just need one person's signature. But I think the more owners there are, generally the more complicated. Yeah. And usually they just have different interests, and that can make it difficult.
It makes sense. So outside of just the transactional side of things, what service areas essentially do you work in? I know previously from the veterinarian side, you said it was nationwide, and you said now you're kind of focusing more local. What does that look like? Yeah,
so I guess you would call it generalist broker, sort of open to anything. A lot of verticals or business areas have specific brokers. For example, the veterinary industry is littered with veterinary specific brokers. There are a lot of folks, I think, who are underrepresented, though, who don't, there are businesses where there's just not enough in existence for there to be specific brokers for that industry. Yeah. And so I think we want to be able to serve everyone, keeping in mind that if there is someone better qualified, I'm always happy to refer that person. For example, if someone calls me and says, I just want to sell my commercial real estate, I don't have any value in the business, I'll call you, right? Because that's your level of expertise. That's not mine. And so, if someone called and said, hey, I want to sell my insurance agency, I would refer them to someone I know who sells insurance agencies. And so, I think it's important to have credibility, to be able to talk to people in an educated fashion about their business and what they're doing. But it's also important just to be honest and not to just chase commissions. Correct. And if there's someone who can do things better than I can, I'll put them with that person, because I'm a big believer in what goes around comes around. And if you put good out, you get good back. So that's the way I would handle this. Yeah, one of the overbearing themes that I have on a lot of these is that, and I always repeat this, especially to my team as well, is that you always have to come from a position of try to be relational, not transactional. Right. So even though it may not work out in your direct benefit from a commission standpoint today, right now, but if I help you with whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish and it's the best outcome for you for right now, hopefully that turns into something and it bears some fruit later down the road. Even if it doesn't bear any, cash fruit down the road, I think just putting goodwill out there is helpful. And people generally will figure it out if you don't know what you're doing, right? You know, I go back to
can't fake it till you make it.
when I was in vet school and I spent a month working with horses, and I didn't know a single thing about horses. And every person who came in, they would look at me and they're like, "You don't know what you're doing here, right?" No, I'm just a student. I don't know anything about horses. I think you don't want to fake it to the point where people feel like they're being misled.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's always important to be honest with folks. Hey, this is what I've done. This is what I haven't done. This is why I feel comfortable selling your business. This is why I don't feel comfortable selling it. It's not, for me, all about commission chasing. It is, I think, about treating people fairly, and what, you know, like I said, what goes around will come back around.
Yeah, tenfold. So before we close it out, do you have any other final tips, like from your side of the table with your industry, that you could give to anybody that might maybe frequently ask questions that you come across with clients that might be able to provide some value to anybody that's watching this?
Yeah, you know, I think everyone asks that same question. What is it worth? Like we said before, not to be repetitive, it's worth what someone will pay. But the best way to get maximum value for a business is to be prepared. Mm-hmm. And again, that could be just a phone call, it could be a consultation, you know, it could be a valuation, which we can do without any cost involved at all. You know, it doesn't cost anything just to chat, to talk, to have lunch, have dinner, look through financials, and really discuss the vision. And so my recommendation is always start as early as possible. It doesn't mean I can't help if someone has waited until the last minute, but the best advice I could give would be to plan ahead.
Well, awesome. Well, it was an absolute pleasure having you on.
It's fun. Thanks for having me.
If you guys have any needs whatsoever, whether it comes to wanting to potentially sell your business, or if you're in the market to look to purchase a business, somewhere around this video or this podcast, you're going to see Brennan's contact information, his phone number, email, website, and the name of your brokerage is Scout Brokerage.
You got it.
Scout Brokerage. So make sure to look out for him, reach out to him if you have any questions. And other than that, we'll see you guys on the next episode of the Northeast Georgia Real Estate Podcast. As we wrap up another episode of the Northeast Georgia Real Estate Podcast, I want to extend a big thank you to our remarkable guest, Brennan McGoldrick with Scout Brokerage. He's a business broker. Phenomenal insights talking about everything that a potential buyer, potential seller needs to have when it comes to selling or buying a business. Truly grateful for your time today. Now, to all you property owners out there, whether you're considering buying, selling, or leasing commercial or residential real estate in the greater Atlanta, Northeast Georgia area, or even the western upstate portion of South Carolina, remember, we are here to support you. Our dedicated team is ready to guide you through every step of your real estate journey. Our team is a powerhouse featuring specialized commercial agents who excel in leasing and sales across diverse categories, including office, retail space, industrial properties, and multifamily residences. Now, on the residential side, our agents specialize in everything from traditional single-family homes to luxury real estate, and even navigating the intricate worlds of REO and short sales. And here's something exciting for all you licensed agents out across the Southeast, covering South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. If you are seeking a supportive community of real estate professionals who can act as your mentors, advisors, coaches, and friends, look no further. At VPR First Team, we provide exclusive one-on-one access to some of the most successful commercial and residential real estate brokers and realtors in the field. So if you're looking to learn, grow, and thrive in your real estate career, or if you're on the hunt for a new home, don't hesitate to reach out to me. We're here to make your journey a smooth one. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Northeast Georgia Real Estate Podcast. If you've enjoyed the insights shared today, remember to subscribe, rate, leave a comment, leave a review. And until next time, keep those dreams alive. We'll catch you on the next episode.